So, Andrew, here we are getting ready to bring Richard Ellis in. You guys both in the Dallas area. You guys both professional. I'm a layman in this world of serving Christ, but I'm really curious what you're interested in getting out of Richard today when we chat with him.
Pastor Ellis has done an amazing job at rallying a church around discipleship, like a non-denominational, intradenominational church, but intracultural. There's a huge African-American, huge Hispanic, huge Anglo-Saxon community, like thirds in his church. You've got rich, you've got poor, and I'm interested to know, how has he been able to engage people with discipleship, cutting through these traditional things that have divided us? And then he's also like a world-class speaker. He's on, I don't know, hundreds of radio channels, downloads out the ears, but he's committed to one-on-one discipleship in his life, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. At least that's what I've heard, the impression I've got from him and from those who've been engaged by him. So I'm curious, what is the secret sauce, and why is this not taken off everywhere?
I'm really looking forward to having both of you in the room for some questions, because not only have you served in the pulpit in the war zone of being a pastor, but now you're at seminary. And I just want to stand you two guys up and say, is it the seminary's fault or is it the church's fault? Where is this problem?
Well, the tail can't wag the dog. The seminary, as great as it is not the hope of the world. The church is. So how can the seminary help the churches, and how can we help him run further, faster, and encourage others to imitate him as we imitate Jesus?
Okay, folks, you've heard it. Here we go. Pastor Richard Ellis is coming up with Dr. Andrew Yates, helping us moderate and take apart this really complicated process in Christ. Here we go.
You've alluded to a couple times to this is not that, this takes longer than you think. What when you say I'm discipling someone, what does that mean to you?
And with just a great guy. He's probably 40, in his early 40s, F-18 fighter pilot, Top Gun instructor.
Oh, the Navy. I'm sorry. We're going to have to edit that. There's no Navy fighter pilots allowed on this broadcast.
Well, my understanding is that the Navy trains the Air Force pilots, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Or were you an Army pilot? I don't remember. So I'm not claiming to have figured it all out. I'm not over anybody. I don't pastor a mega church, reach a lot of people on lots of platforms, but I will tell you, if you're trying to build a mega church, this is not that. This is about building mega Christians.
Hello, folks. Dennis Allen with the Disciple Dilemma. Pastor Richard Ellis, the founding pastor of Reunion Church in Dallas, is with us today, along with Dr. Andrew Yates over at Dallas Theological Seminary, to talk about, are we faking it in discipleship or making it? Richard has been a 6th-generation pastor. In other words, 5 generations ahead of him were also pastors. He's been in the church a long time, and yet the idea of being a disciple maker never seemed to take. And Richard's got a great story to talk about, both his own experience coming to discipleship as the core of what Jesus told us to do, and his process at Reunion Church, making disciple makers who make disciples. Great episode with Richard Ellis and Dr. Andrew Yates. Here we go.
Folks, normally I'm talking to you from my library, and what I'm in right now is an Airbnb down in Greenville, South Carolina, because my bride and I have uprooted from D.C. We've headed down to Greenville, where some of her family lives, where I'm told that my fate is now in their hands. We're going to live here. I'm going to die here, that kind of stuff. And I got to apologize because it's a little bit of just a room. But as I was talking with Andrew earlier, I've tried to put my banjos up there just so there's something in the way. And I'm not sure which is worse, my theology or my banjos. But on that note, we got 2 superstars when it comes to Christianity today with us. First, I'm going to start with the co-host, and we'll just keep ramping it up from there. Dr. Andrew Yates, doctor from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, serving at Dallas Theological Seminary. He is the coordinator for global discipleship. That is an ominous title. We'll try to pick on him, Richard, a little bit on that
That's
later.
good.
Along with me to talk to Pastor Richard Ellis. Let me give you a little bit of Richard's rap sheet because you need to understand what you're getting into. You may want to run. This guy is 6 generations in the pulpit. This guy is a missionary kid, obviously a pastor's kid. This guy is the founding pastor of Reunion Church in Dallas. And I'm not sure how his family survived, but I'm really, really hopeful we can extract from him what he's doing to help thrive and survive in the world of discipleship. Richard, thank you for joining us on the Disciple Dilemma.
Absolutely. Love being with you.
You are a pastor at just what I would say is a super healthy church that's dialed in on the Great Commission. Can you help us? Has that always been the case? And was there, I'm curious to know, what was the time when, if there was, that you went where you realized we're not focused on the main thing? What was the impetus for that? And how'd you get to where you are today?
Well, the church I started the church with 11 people, then 4 in my family, so 15 total back at the end of 97, and started out in a little office, went to a school, ended up suing the DISD, just a very long story how that all went down, but that made possible 230 schools in the Dallas school district to be available for churches.
Wow.
Moved to the convention center. We were in the convention center for about 23 years. Then we recently moved into one of the top 10 nightclubs in the country, Silo, Dallas. And so that's where we are now. Purpose for that is to reach people who don't feel comfortable necessarily going into a traditional church. Biblically, you can't go to church. It's not a place, it's a people, but we've turned it into a place you go, not a people you are. But from the very beginning, I worked at a large church before I started this one, kind of jumped, no outside support.
Mm-hmm.
And don't know if I can do it again, but yeah, the mission statement of the church from jump was disciples making disciples.
Great.
That was the goal. And you would think that you would not have to be intentional about diversity, but the default church kind of in America, at least, is homogeneous, which I used to have a joke about homogeneous, but I won't tell that anymore. Just sounds like a really smart gay guy. But someone came up with that years ago, 40 or so years ago, and decided, like kind gather. Well, you don't need the Bible to, of course, bowlers gather, golfers gather. But, if you make Jesus the main thing, then everybody shows up. So Channel 8 here locally did a story on us, aired last Sunday night. And even to me, it was like unbelievable. Hispanic, Black, tattoos, white, everybody. So we don't, have quotas, but, you just, when you say everyone is welcome, and you mean that, then eventually they kind of do show up a little bit. But about 7 years into this church plant, I realized I was like really frustrated. I thought if you said everybody's welcome, everybody would come. But then someone made a simple comment at a conference I ended up at. He said, everybody doesn't want to be with everybody. And I thought, wow, how crazy is that? So, yeah, we're pretty intentional about outreach. And as we get into the discipleship conversation, I'm of the opinion that if a pastor is not leading people to Christ and sharing that and making that part of the process, you're not likely to get the people doing it any more than if you punch, hard on discipleship, but the pastor is not discipling people. It's not that it can't happen. It's just not likely to happen because you're doing something internally that almost makes him look bad. So, I share the gospel with a lot of people, and I tend to get accused of being a little rough on this, but my evangelism verse is by this will all men, let's see. Well, that's my other one about loving each other. But Jesus said, follow me and I'll make you to become fishers of men. So people say, well, I'm a follower of Jesus. I go, okay, well, tell me a fishing story, like a recent one, not back from 20 years ago. Because if you're following, you're fishing. And if you claim to be a follower and you're not fishing, you're not following. doesn't mean you're not a Christian. And you can do evangelism without doing discipleship, but you can't do discipleship without doing evangelism. It's just built into it. So yeah, we got people that, it takes longer than you'd think. And, we can talk about that as well in the discipleship category. This is not some program you put in place. This is having children and raising them. And that comes with the same challenges that having physical children and raising them has. So yeah, but we're strong on reaching out to people, but not just, okay, you had a baby, congratulations. Now what? You got to raise these kids. And that's where I think the church for too long has notched the fuselage for babies born, not disciples made. And that's not what he's about.
Richard, I want to pursue that because I think that the Western Christian culture, in the articles that I read, the scholars that I listen to, people like you guys, Andrew and you, talking about this, there's a tremendous disconnect in the pew with what you just said versus how I'm supposed to live. So I'm following up on this metaphor that you set up, which is that we have created, in some respects, a culture which is significantly evangelism, all start the next evangelism process, as opposed to what you just described a minute ago. And you just used a really fascinating phrase. Our podcast generally has leaders watching it who are wondering what's going on in my church. Why can't I get things to work? You just said a moment ago, you can do evangelism without discipleship, but you can't do discipleship without evangelism. So I want to ask this really tantalizing question. Which one actually is the superior and which one is the subordinate in this process to you?
Well, this is maybe going way deeper than you want to go. How old was Adam when he was made? Right? Clearly he's talking, he's walking. This is not an infant. So I would venture to say he's past puberty, or he's not making babies. So it's not a chicken and egg thing. It's a chicken, clearly, because an egg can't hatch itself. So a mature believer has got, this is really wilder than you want to hear. When a mature believer hits spiritual puberty, he's got seed.
Yeah.
And he's either planting that seed or he's not. But if he is planting that seed, unfortunately, what we've done is we say, okay, go win people to Christ. Well, that's all they're told to do. And they're trained. I've trained in EE, all this stuff, and trained as a trainer. But even the history on that stuff is within 2 to 3 years, they fizzle out, unfortunately, and stop sharing their faith. If you're following Jesus, you're going to be a fisherman because you've always got a story from following Jesus. You're living with him, you're talking to him, and so you're sharing the gospel. So I'm not against, most Christians have never led anybody to Christ either. We're not making disciples, and we're really not leading anybody to Christ, or the whole, the world would have gotten saved a long time ago. So I think you got a better shot long term at reaching people in terms of evangelism if you have a discipled person, a mature believer who understands the following and the fishing piece, than if you just train a bunch of people to fish and then you get discouraged because they quit fishing. Because it's like we have accused for a long time the Black community for making babies and not raising them. Right? Black men make a baby, don't raise them. Well, the church is worse than any group. We celebrate the births, but then you can't find these babies, and it's catastrophic. And part of the reason I'm so huge on discipleship is I was one of those babies. Nothing against my mom and dad. Just a lot of people. There's some people in the world that are stupid, but a lot of Christians are just ignorant because they're orphaned Christians that just don't know any different. And a ton of those people are pastors. We're saying to pastors, you should be making disciples. Well, nobody ever gave them any time. And now they're in so much trouble personally like, they get sucked into porn or whatever they're doing, and they don't want any accountability with somebody to come on and say, hey, I'll walk with you and let's figure out what's going on. Well, I ain't telling you what's going on because I've been struggling for 30 years. And so now that's out, right? So it's complicated, until, and in my case, I got to the place where I wanted to die because it wasn't working. And it's amazing what you're willing to talk about and share when you're trying to figure out how to stay alive. And that was in seminary. I'm thinking about killing myself in seminary. That's not what's supposed to be happening.
This is wonderful that you brought this up, because Richard, I think between you and me, isn't the real problem people like Andrew over in the seminaries? They just aren't doing a very good job of helping pastors get this disciple making thing. If we could just fix the seminaries, wouldn't everything be great? And Andrew's just screwed this up, hasn't he, Richard? What do you think?
Yeah, but once he gets ear hair, it'll all change. That ear hair starts growing. Then we'll be able to use him to reach people. But you would think it's so simple, because the last thing your leader says before he leaves the planet, you would think, okay, well, that's probably pretty important as you're going, make disciples. And you don't have a single one of the 11, eventually, add another one. None of them raising their hand going, what do you mean by make disciples? They all know what he meant. And whether they embarked on that, now that's another question, because you don't even hear about some of them. And it's possible that some of them didn't follow through, because I experienced that. I got guys, and I sit them down now, and Paul telling Timothy, teach faithful men who will teach others also. So I've just started sitting with men and saying, look, I only got so many years left, and I can only disciple thoroughly so many men. So I need a commitment from you before we start. I think you're a faithful man, but I need a commitment that you will teach others also when we're done, or this is a waste of time. I'm not interested in helping you be happier, a better husband, a better man. I need a disciple maker. So if you're in, then tell me that. If you're not, I'll have lunch with you. We can talk. I'll try to encourage you, but I'm not engaging. I'm not going to give you my life unless you're really willing to follow. And, that sounds harsh to people, but people flake out, right? It's just part of the deal. So in a lifetime of trying to make disciples, and, you all know this, Dennis, you're old enough to know it, and Andrew, you'll figure it out. This guy's he's going to do it. And I've done it long enough to know, even the people you think would keep going, peter out. And I think it's interesting that we use that phrase, peter out. Clearly he re-engaged, but Peter was out for a little while there, because straight as the gate, narrow is the way, few there be that find it. But I am encouraged that I have found a few. But I will tell you, it is a few. It is, so if somebody's watching this, a pastor thinks, okay, well, I missed it. I missed discipleship. So let's do this. And then they get their staff in a room and say, okay, we're going to do 10 weeks. Normally we do 8, but we'll really stretch this out and do 8 weeks of discipleship like that. This is not that. This is not information. This is, information with application that leads to some transformation as opposed to constipation. So
you've alluded to a couple times to this is not that, this takes longer than you think. What when you say I'm discipling someone, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so if I just got done with just a great guy. He's probably 40, in his early 40s, F-18 fighter pilot, Top Gun instructor.
The Navy. I'm sorry. We're going to have to edit that. There's no Navy fighter pilot allowed on this podcast.
Well, my understanding is that the Navy trains the Air Force pilots, but maybe I'm wrong about that. So or were you an Army pilot? I don't remember. But a guy like that, when he got to me, he was starving, right? He misses the brotherhood of the close fight. He can't find what he had in the military anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I see him and I hug him like he's my brother. because he is. Tell him I love him. He is all over it. Half the New Testament is written to screwed up Christians. But a ton of this stuff is we don't have anybody in our lives. We don't have accountability. But this isn't just about discipleship is not, to me, primarily about accountability. It is someone coming alongside you and raising you. The old man that changed. I mean, I wouldn't be here without Claude Townsend. And he was not some sophisticated seminary trained man, but he knew the scriptures. He knew Jesus. I was desperate, and he gave me two things: time and truth. The reason I am all over the discipleship thing is I would not have made it. And there are so many people, men especially, who are walking around and they're acting like Christians. They're trying to make it seem like it's okay. But I was driving down the road, trying to find, I had picked out a bridge I was going to hit commuting back and forth from seminary and my church. Picked out a bridge. I had already knew what my funeral would be because I was driving 4.5 hours from one way from Fort Worth to this country church. And, there'd be a great story. He fell asleep, hit a bridge. He was serving Jesus. They would never know I'd killed myself. And looking back on it, I realized I didn't want to die. I didn't know I couldn't make it work. I hated reading the Bible because I'd read about joy, peace, love, all this stuff. I had none of it.
So I want to swing this, Andrew, real quick to you on this subject of disciple making and just ask about the state of the students in seminaries in general, not necessarily DTS alone, but what are you hearing about despair and anxiousness among the student bodies out there?
Oh, yeah. Mental health, I think more than just the seminary. I mean, generationally coming out of COVID, but also looking at what's going on with, New York Times bestseller, Amazon top level, anxious generation, cell phones, isolation, and separation generationally. Richard just talked a ton about having parents. People don't have biological parents in their lives anymore than they have spiritual parents in their lives, and it's an endemic. And mental health is just a disaster. I just heard that I was a little proud and disappointed. It was bittersweet, but Dallas Seminary has the largest graduate counseling program in the state of Texas. And I'm looking at my alma mater, A&M, which is, 100 times larger than the student body at DTS. I'm thinking, what is going on? And I think we've realized that it's a disaster out there. And we cannot hire enough counselors. There are not enough emotional support animals out there that to help us recover from the situation that we find ourselves in with mental health with students. And I think a big part of this is a lack of parenting. Kids trying to figure it out on their own, Lord of the Flies situation. It is not good. And I think it was about 5 years ago, we had two different individuals reach out to the seminary and say, we love discipling people one-on-one. One of them is a good friend of mine and Pastor Ellis. But the school said, you want to disciple people? Sounds great. Email goes out and 300 students replied to the email, which itself is a miracle. But they said, no one has ever discipled me. And we're super busy, but we're not going to make it if we don't have somebody invest in us. And so, this is super urgent. But I think as busy as especially millennials are and younger, we know that we need to have someone in our lives. Pastor Ellis, what would you say, having been in that situation yourself, having never had someone just invest in you like you just described, does a student who comes to seminary, do they just go find somebody? Do they pray, God, send somebody to tap me on the shoulder? Or what's their next step? What do they say? What do they do? And then what do they invite someone into, if that's the case?
Yeah, the tragedy of a ton of this is the pool to draw from is so tiny.
Yeah.
And so you think, well, the seminary, all the professors, I know Mark Yarborough a long time, and I know Mark is personally discipling students, or it won't work, right?
Yeah.
At least he has been, as far as I know. And so that helps. But I mean, I don't know what the number is, but I promise you, there are a ton of professors at DTS who were never discipled personally, so they got no time for it. They don't understand the impact it can have. So even if a student approaches a professor or someone on the staff and they've never been through it, they don't even know what they're talking about. And the kid that's asking for it, the student may not even know what they're talking. They're like, I need some help. It's just way messier than anybody's saying. And it takes patience, it takes love. And part of the reason I am willing to be patient with a guy that I disciple is Claude was so patient with me.
Yeah.
And it took years. It's not even a 6-month thing. It's not a
Yeah.
year thing. I kind of see it as a lifelong process. And you got Jesus doing it 3 years every day. I mean, these guys were together 3 years solid, almost every day, except when he sends them out, or, that's a lot of time.
What would you say to a pastor that says there's too many people to do focused parenting, spiritual parenting for the long haul? So say 2 or 3 years to 3 or 4 people. I don't have time for that.
So the scripture says if a man can't run a family, he should not run a church. Okay. So a pastor, if he has a wife and children, should be demonstrating that he can raise a family. He doesn't have to raise all the families in the church, but he is demonstrating that it is possible. And if they come for advice, he says, yeah, we've had some challenges. Here's what I did, and I can help you. If the guy's not raising any children in the church, raising up leaders that can raise up leaders that can raise up leaders, he's going to just have front door, back door issues and be frustrated for the rest of his ministry because, yeah, he may be drawing a crowd, but he's not multiplying. We are not reproducing. We're making babies, some babies, but we're not making disciples that can make disciples. Just won't do it. And a ton of it is they never experienced it themselves, so they don't see the value, or they're just some kind of egomaniac that, no one's going to get near me, and the moat between the pulpit and the front row has to be so big. And like, that's not Jesus. And when you show up, you don't have to show up for everybody in that way, but when you show up for one man like that, I have changed his life because Claude changed my life, because Jesus changed Claude's life.
Would you please take a moment and tell me what the average pastor thinks of for the average way to crank up what he thinks the average definition of discipleship really is in a church? In other words, what I'm asking you to describe is, what are some of the dead ends that we want to chase that experience has shown you guys it won't work? You've got to get away from that thinking. What are some of these dead ends pastors chase typically?
Knowledge. A Bible study is good, but it in itself is a dead end. Your observation and interpretation has to go into application for your own life, or it is an absolute disaster. Knowledge puffs up, and that's a ministry risk. That's a pitfall of seminary, is you get all this knowledge that puffs up and you have pride. And if you have pride, you're competing with God and you will lose. You cannot be an arrogant, proud leader and represent God. He will humble you so fast. That is just an absolute disaster, getting more knowledge without being transformed by the renewing of your mind, not just the growing of your mind. That'd be the first thing I'd say. What'd you say, Pastor Ellis?
In that regard, what I say to people is CPR is not breathing on someone, it's breathing in someone. You have to make contact. You can't just say, here's what the scripture says, this is what it means, you should apply it, and then disappear on them. I think there's probably a ton of preachers just pissed. And I grew up around this. They are, I couldn't figure out as a kid, I didn't know how to express it this way. They looked like they were either mad as hell or mad at hell. But I thought they were It turned out I think they were just mad as hell. And it didn't even work for, I'm telling you, I know this feeling. It's not working for me personally. And yeah, you want to talk to me about discipleship and I should be discipling these people. Nobody ever had time for me.
But in fairness, Richard, you also are a product of multi-generations of culture. I'm not blaming parents. What I'm saying is, since the 3rd century, the church has been saying you have to look like this, behave like this, act like this, and then everything's done. And you're rejecting that right now and saying that's a symptom, not the mission.
So now you have well-meaning people who show up at church and they're doing everything they do. Okay, I'm reading my Bible, I'm praying, but I need help. But there is no help because it takes too much time. And to your point a minute ago, Andrew, about, well, it takes too much time. Okay, well then put your 6-year-old up for adoption. It takes too much time, right? No one does that unless something's gone terribly wrong, right?
Yeah.
You don't abandon a 6-year-old. And even when they turn 18, you're not done. You raise your kids to the death.
But the other side of the coin is the pastors are thinking, I need to put my congregation into daycare. If they just get a sermon series and a small group and a little bit of a Bible study, that'll take care of the problem. What's good or not good about that in discipleship?
It's not bad. It's just, you got to take it all the way out. I got 3 daughters. I didn't spend all my time with all of them at the same time. I called all 3 of my daughters. They're grown, married, one with kids. I called all 3 of them yesterday. I didn't get them on a conference call. And every call was different. You got to have parents who disciple their children, walk with their children. I'm not talking about just raising them. I'm talking about, the nurture and admonition of the Lord, where they know basic things about how to walk out the Christian life. Then they in turn go do that with their children, with their friends or people. And if they end up in ministry, I mean, I can no more not disciple men. I feel like I'd be dead.
So let me ask this question. This is what's going on in some pastors' heads right now. I've heard this time and time again as feedback on our podcast. You guys are telling me as a pastor, I got to go disciple every person in every pew. Bail us out of that trap.
No, pick the most faithful men, because a lot of pastors already have people who they're willing, they're faithful, they're committed, they're trying. They don't know what else to do. They are waiting for someone to raise them. And if the pastor will look at them and say, look, you and me, once a week, I mean, this is not, you can change your whole church by just taking on a handful of men. And yes, it'll take a little bit, but eventually that dominoes into the congregation. Now you got those people discipling people, and then that becomes the norm, and people show up at church and get saved, and somebody automatically adopts them and enters this process. It's not a perfect process. And honestly, there are some people who don't want to be discipled. I don't want you up in my grill. I don't want to be accountable. I don't want you finding out what my struggles are. So I'm out.
Guys, let's simulate that I'm a pastor listening to you today. And I'm sitting here going like, yeah, I got to start listening to these two and doing this. But look, nobody ever did this for me. Nobody in my church gets this. I'm all alone here. There's nothing that I get about this other than just the concept. What is it exactly you want me to do? Because I'm all alone, guys. What do I do?
For me, so I was a pastor at one of the largest churches in the history of the world. And it's been 5 years now since I was there. And the thing that, there were very many exciting things that I was a part of and able to do that I would never have imagined that I'd be able to do. But John 6:66, it's creepy, but a lot of disciples left. Jesus
Yeah.
started saying things that were confusing and hard, and they just left. And Jesus looks at the 12 and says, "Are you going to leave?" And the 12 said, like, "Where are we going to go? You have the words of life." And I think the mountaintop experiences I had were awesome, but the things that I look back that mattered and the things that look back that I'm most proud of are the deep relationships I had with a few people that I was able to really focus on. Richard, what does that look like for you? Um,
Yeah, okay, so the question was, your pastor out there says, "What do you want me to do?"
yeah.
I use John Tolson and I are great friends. He's got a book called The Four Priorities.
Oh, yeah.
What I was doing with people when I'd sit down with them is I would talk to them about the relationship this way with God, with God, internally with themselves, with other people. So when I met John, he was listening to me on the radio, showed up at church, and we've been friends. We have lunch every Thursday for years. Um, but I thought, wait a minute, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is the basic stuff. And I try to explain
Yeah.
to people a book like that is like an old school atlas. It is not the journey. It helps you on the journey. I'm
Yeah.
telling you that the average Christian has no idea about basic stuff. They're acting like they know, but they don't know. And
Yeah.
then they eventually just give up and say, well, I guess this is it. I'm supposed to go to church, listen to a sermon, give some money, and shut up and let the professionals handle it. And I guess this is my life. The verse that says, "Eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor has entered the heart of man the things that God has prepared for those that love him," I've been using that forever about heaven. That has nothing to do with heaven. That applies to here.
Yeah.
So what has God got for us here? And you got Christians walking around who have no idea what that could possibly mean. So if you're a pastor, gosh, I could almost give you my cell phone on this podcast. I mean, you can reach me. Man, just don't. If you have any desire, reach out to Dennis. I'll help you. I'll help you. Because if five pastors out there figure this out and say, okay, will you help me and talk to me about this? I'll help you.
That
I'm
changes the
not,
state,
I,
that changes the country. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not claiming to have figured it all out. I'm not over anybody. I don't pastor a mega church, reach a lot of people on lots of platforms, but and I will tell you, if you're trying to build a mega church, this is not that. This is about building mega Christians. I encourage you, reach out to Dennis. I will say one thing about what Dennis said about his corporate clients. He said, turning around a company is like repentance. And I know he knows this already. It's really, to repent is not to turn around. To repent is to change your mind. And changing your mind turns you around. So helping people change their mind, when you tell a pastor, like, you've been thinking this is what's working, you got to change your mind. You got to say, you know what? Somehow I missed this. I screwed up. I'm going to change my mind. We're going to retool. And I realize now that just teaching Bible studies, all this stuff, that's all programs, I've got to engage with some individual men in my church, disciple them, and be patient and let that thing move.
So my question is, Pastor Ellis, you've making disciples, got discipled, interracial, different. I mean, so diverse of a church, mega church. I mean, all these very impressive radio celebrity status. The disciple Jesus loved, John said, "I've got no greater joy than to hear my children are walking in the truth." His spiritual children, the people he discipled. Is that true?
I didn't even know how to explain this to you. I didn't even know it was possible. My church, these people, I love them. They love me. We love each other. And when you walk into a gathering it would be impossible for you to walk in and bring anyone that would not be welcome. It's not possible. And Jesus said, "By this will all men know that you're my disciples, that you have love one for another." It's not the music. It's not the preaching. So when you love people, you have time for people, you help them grow, and then they start doing that with each other and new people that come in. That becomes the rebar in the slab. I mean, it's him. And it's just I wouldn't trade with any pastor anywhere in the world for any size church for any amount of money. I have the sweetest gig in the whole world. Um, I got something coming up, the silo thing. We're in this silo. It's a nightclub, clearly. And my youngest daughter's best friend is a gay guy. I led his sister to Christ, but he's still out there. And she invites him to church and he won't come. He's even asked her if I would marry him to some gay guy. And he's like, yeah, I guess he wouldn't, but he knows I love him. So the other day he said to Catherine, he said, RuPaul is coming to the silo. He said, if your dad will take me to see RuPaul in the silo, I'll come to church. I said, you tell him I'll take him. And sometimes you have an easier time discipling somebody who's just hurting than trying to turn somebody who's acting like a Christian. I think it's true now what Jesus said back then, the fields are wide unto harvest. The problem is not harvest. The problem is labor's in the harvest. But we got to multiply ourselves to have those laborers. And that takes time, but it works. Man, don't think it doesn't work, because I am living proof. My life was changed by an old man that took me on and discipled me.
So what I'm hearing you say to me today is we need perhaps, if I were a pastor, I'm not, but as pastors listen to this, I need to stop thinking of myself as needing to get completely certified or a PhD in disciple making to have it all figured out before I start this journey. I need to get this journey going with one or two. Did you just say kind of like that?
Yeah, and don't worry about discipling your whole church. Just say, Lord, who is it? Who is the man that's already near me? He's probably hurting, and I have not given him the time that he needs. It's not about just time, though. You got to give him truth and time. That combination is lethal. And you have to be willing to go first. I don't sit down with people and say, hey, tell me about your struggles. I say, look, let me tell you about my stuff. And then all of a sudden they go, wait, but you're a pastor. I'm like, dude, we're all, we all squat the same way. It's not, I've not arrived. And then you got Paul at the end of his life saying, the thing that I don't want to do, I do. The thing I want to do, I don't do. Who'll deliver me from them? It's like, as an old man, he's still in the fight. And I've talked to plenty of old men and said, hey, does this stuff ever go away? They're like, well, it hadn't yet. So don't think you got to present yourself. You say, well, if people find out that I'm human, they'll fire me. Well, then get fired and go be a person. My gosh, enough of this playing, robotic, rehearse your lines. I mean, my church I have limits about how far I'll go and what I'll share, but I try to be very vulnerable and, expose myself a little bit and say, look, I'm trying to point you somewhere else. You need him. I need him. I won't make it without Jesus. I just won't. And I won't make it without these men around me. So, and I didn't know that. I just wasn't raised that way. I was raised that you didn't need anybody, I'm the pastor, and it's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I'm in authority. I don't think you can ever be in authority unless you've been under authority. And so even Jesus was under authority. He didn't do anything without, if that's what the Father did. So, man, I beg you, if you're out there and still watching and listening and the Holy Spirit's prompting you and you're going, wow, there may be something to this. I am more concerned about the people watching that are personally hurting than trying to get you to go help someone else. I encourage you, call Dennis, call me. You can call me. I'll answer every call if I ever get. You can call me and I'll give you time. Because if you really are hurting and you know that, I know what that feels like, and it is catastrophic. Because it's not that you're not called. It's not that you don't love God. It's just you may not know what to do, and you may be hurting so much personally, you're afraid to tell somebody that, because then what's going to happen? So make sure you're personally healthy, and you got at least 3 men on this podcast who would give you some time.
Pastor Richard Ellis, if we want to creep your social world, I know one place we can find you is a number of talks you've given at richardellistalks.com. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And there's some other traffic we can pick up on too. If people want to see what this church that you've been talking about, Reunion Church, is all about, where would we find that on the web?
You can go to reunionchurch.org. You can go to pray.com, and we're on one place. There's so many platforms. I don't even know all of them. iTunes. I couldn't tell you, honestly. I don't know where we are everywhere, just trying to take the planet.
Andrew, if folks want to grab some traction with you, where do we find your world out in the web?
Yeah, if you just email me at discipleship@dts.edu, that comes to me and my team here at Dallas Theological Seminary. And you can just Google Dallas Theological Seminary and discipleship, and you'll connect with our resources, one of which is the one that Pastor Ellis just talked about. Our friend John Tolson put together a great curriculum. And Mark Yarbrough, the president here at DTS, has told me, if you can encourage anyone anywhere on earth to grow in discipleship, do it. So you've got my email, if not my cell phone, and I do my best to answer every single email. So we'd love to encourage you. I mean, it's like, once you've tasted and seen, there's no joy like it.
Would you help the church think more about discipleship? Would you help us get the conversation started to talk about the biblical discipleship Jesus gave us? Please follow us. Our website, www.thediscipledilemma.com. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and all the RSS feeds. If you'd follow or like us, you'll help us get leverage in the digital marketplace to talk about the fact that discipleship needs to be talked about. And as always, folks, thanks for listening.